The strange thing about boundary problems is that they often wear the costume of virtue. The compliant person looks kind. The avoidant person looks independent. The controller looks strong. The non-responsive person looks calm. But Cloud and Townsend want us to look under the costume and ask what is really happening with responsibility, love, fear, and truth. Welcome back to this summary of boundaries. In this episode, we cover the book's diagnosis, the common boundary problems, how they develop, the 10 laws of boundaries, and the myths that make people afraid to change. The first boundary problem is compliance. Compliant people say yes when they need to say no. They adapt to the needs, moods, demands, or expectations of others so quickly that they lose contact with themselves. They're not always consciously lying. Many have trained themselves not to notice their own limits until resentment, exhaustion, or anxiety tells the truth for them. The compliant person may fear anger. They may fear abandonment. They may fear being seen as selfish. They may have learned that disagreement is dangerous. So they become experts at reading the room. The problem is that a life built around avoiding disapproval cannot become a free life. The second problem is avoidance. Avoidants have trouble saying yes to help, support, comfort, or emotional need. They may have strong walls but weak gates. When they are hurt, they disappear. When they need care, they minimize it. When someone offers love, they distrust it or feel ashamed of needing it. Compliance and avoidance can combine in painful ways. A person may say yes to everyone else's needs and no to their own. That creates a soul that is open in the wrong direction and closed in the wrong direction. Everyone can come in, but nothing nourishing is allowed to enter. The third problem is control. Controllers do not respect other people's no. Some controllers are aggressive. They push, threaten, argue, shame, or overpower. Others are manipulative. They use guilt, charm, helplessness, crisis, or spiritual language to get their way. The style differs, but the issue is the same. The other person's boundary is treated as an obstacle to defeat. The fourth problem is non-responsiveness. Non-responsive people do not hear the real needs of others. They may be self-absorbed, disconnected, or harshly independent. Boundaries are not an excuse for this. The book is careful here. A healthy boundary does not mean your pain is irrelevant. It means I can love you without taking ownership of what only you can own. Cloud and Townsend then ask where these patterns come from. They point to development. Children learn boundaries gradually. They need attachment, safety, separateness, practice, correction, and love that survives disagreement. A child who is allowed to say no in age-appropriate ways learns that separateness is not the end of relationship. But if a family punishes independence, mocks limits, rewards compliance, ignores pain, or rescues children from all consequences, boundary development can be distorted. Some children learn that love means disappearing. Some learn that power means control. Some learn that need is shameful. Some never learn that actions have consequences. The book's developmental picture is not about blaming parents forever. It is about understanding why adult change can feel so emotionally expensive. If saying no once brought rage, withdrawal, punishment, or rejection, then a simple adult limit may feel like walking back into an old storm. Then come the 10 laws of boundaries. These laws are the book's attempt to describe how relationships and responsibility actually work. The law of sowing and reaping says choices produce consequences. If someone is protected from the harvest of their behavior, they may never learn. Rescuing can interrupt reality, and reality is often the teacher a person most needs. The law of responsibility says we are responsible to one another, but not for one another. We are responsible to love, tell truth, encourage, forgive, and help. We are not responsible to become the other person's conscience, willpower, or emotional engine. The law of power says we have power over some things and not others. We do not have power to make another person change. We do have power to confess, choose, ask for help, set limits, and change our own participation in a destructive pattern. The law of respect says we must respect the boundaries of others if we want our boundaries respected. This is where the book refuses hypocrisy. You cannot demand freedom for your no while punishing someone else's no. The law of motivation asks why we give. Love, freedom, gratitude, and values create one kind of giving. Fear, guilt, payback, approval, hunger, and shame create another. The action may look the same from the outside, but the soul underneath is different. The law of evaluation says boundaries may cause pain, but pain is not always harm. A dentist may cause pain while healing a tooth. A limit may disappoint someone while helping the relationship become more truthful. The question is not, did anyone feel discomfort? The question is, what kind of fruit will this produce? The law of proactivity says wounded people often move from helplessness to reactive anger before they learn mature freedom. Anger can reveal a violated boundary, but it cannot be the final home. The goal is not revenge. The goal is active, values-based choice. The law of envy says envy keeps us focused outside our property line. Instead of developing what is ours, we stare at what someone else has. Boundaries pull attention back to our own choices, work, grief, and growth. The law of activity says growth requires movement. Passive waiting rarely builds boundaries. People must practice ask, risk, speak, and try. The law of exposure says boundaries must become visible. A hidden no is not a boundary that others can respond to. Secret resentment does not teach anyone the property line. Boundaries need words, actions, and clarity. After the laws come the myths. These are the beliefs that make boundaries feel morally dangerous. The first myth is that boundaries are selfish. The book answers that selfishness is not the same as stewardship. Caring for your life is not the opposite of loving others. It is often what makes love sustainable. Another myth says boundaries are a sign of disobedience or a lack of spirituality. But the authors argue that mature faith includes truth, freedom, responsibility, and consequences. Forced goodness is not the same as love. Another myth says if I set boundaries, I will hurt others. The book answers, you may disappoint them, but disappointment is not always damage. Sometimes the discomfort of a boundary is exactly what reveals an unhealthy dependency. Another myth says boundaries mean anger. In reality, anger is often a signal that a boundary has been crossed, but a mature boundary does not have to be delivered with rage. Calm clarity can be stronger than an emotional explosion. Another myth says boundaries will make people leave. Sometimes they might. That is the frightening part. But the book presses the question, if a relationship survives only when you have no limits, what kind of relationship is it? What makes this episode so important is that the book moves boundaries out of mood and into principle. Boundaries are not just something you feel when you're tired. They're not a personality preference for assertive people. They're laws of love, responsibility, and reality. Thank you for listening to this second episode. Next, we take these ideas into the relationships where boundaries become painfully practical: family, friendship, and marriage. Final close. When no feels dangerous, the goal is not to become hard. The goal is to become honest enough that love can stop depending on fear. The 4 boundary problems are also useful because they show that boundary failure is not one personality type. Some people fail by being too open. Some fail by being too closed. Some fail by pushing through other people's limits. Some fail by refusing to respond to legitimate need. The goal is not to become a tougher version of your current imbalance. The goal is mature love with a working gait. Compliers often need permission to disappoint people. That sounds small, but it is not. If a person grew up believing disappointment equals danger, then every no feels morally loaded. The authors want the compliant person to learn that another person's disappointment may be sad, but it is survivable. It may even be necessary. Avoidants often need permission to need. They may be proud of not asking for anything, but the book treats that as a boundary problem too. A gate that never opens is not maturity. It is isolation with good branding. Healthy people can receive comfort, correction, help, and love without treating need as humiliation. Controllers need to experience the reality that other people are separate. This is hard for aggressive controllers because they're used to winning through force. It is also hard for manipulative controllers because they're used to winning through emotional fog. A real boundary gives both types the same message. You may choose your behavior, but you may not own my yes. Non-responsive people need to learn that boundaries are not a spiritual-sounding excuse for indifference. If someone says, your needs are your problem, and uses boundaries to avoid love, they have missed the point. Boundaries define responsibility so love can become more accurate, not so compassion can be deleted. The developmental chapters also explain why boundary work may feel younger than the person doing it. An adult may intellectually know they can say no, while emotionally feeling like a child about to be punished. That does not mean the adult is foolish. It means the nervous system remembers old lessons. Growth often requires new experiences strong enough to challenge old fear. The 10 laws give structure to that growth. The law of sowing and reaping is especially uncomfortable because many families and workplaces are built around interrupting the harvest. The irresponsible person sows chaos, and the responsible person reaps stress. Boundaries return the harvest to the field where it was planted. The law of power protects people from wasting years on impossible assignments. You cannot repent for someone else. You cannot mature for someone else. You cannot want sobriety, honesty, discipline, or faithfulness for someone else strongly enough to make it happen. You can choose your own truth, help, limits, and consequences. The law of respect is the safeguard against hypocrisy. Some people learn boundaries and become skilled at protecting themselves while remaining offended by everyone else's limits. That is not boundary maturity. It is self-protection without mutuality. Respect says the same freedom I need is also freedom I must grant. The myths matter because fear often disguises itself as virtue. I'm not setting a boundary because I am loving. Maybe, or maybe I'm terrified. I'm not saying no because I am loyal. Maybe, or maybe I'm avoiding conflict. I am not letting consequences happen because I am merciful. Maybe, or maybe I am controlling the outcome so I do not have to feel anxious. The book's challenge is to examine motive without becoming cruel to yourself. Many boundaryless patterns began as survival. They help someone stay connected, avoid rage, or win approval. The point is not shame. The point is to notice that an old survival strategy may be damaging adult love.